There is a moment that arrives without warning, a quiet collapse that most men never see coming. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic failure or obvious catastrophe. It happens in the space between a text message sent and the hours spent waiting for a reply. It occurs in the rearrangement of a Saturday that was supposed to be yours, now handed over to accommodate her uncertainty. It happens in the gym session you skip, the project you postpone, the friend you cancel on, all because some part of you has begun to believe that your value is being calculated elsewhere, by someone else, and that calculation is the only one that matters. I work with men who describe this feeling in different ways, but the architecture underneath is always the same. They talk about heaviness, a sense that they are performing their own lives rather than living them. They mention how they've started to feel like supporting actors in a story that was supposed to be theirs, and when I ask them when it began, they rarely know, because it didn't start with one decision. It started with 1,000 small erosions, each one invisible, each one justified, each one taking him further from the man he used to recognize in the mirror. You can see it in his posture when he talks about her, the way his voice loses its center, the way he negotiates with himself out loud, trying to convince you and himself that everything is fine, that she needs time, that he's being patient, that love requires sacrifice. And beneath all of that, there is a question he will not ask, because asking it would force him to confront something he is not ready to face. When did I become the kind of man who needs permission to exist? Carl Jung spent his life studying the hidden forces that govern human behavior, those invisible currents beneath consciousness that shape how we move through the world without our knowing. And one of his most uncomfortable observations was this: the more a man surrenders his internal authority to an external source, the more he becomes possessed by forces he cannot control. He called this the dissolution of the self. The modern man calls it love. But what Jung understood, and what most men discover too late, is that the two are often indistinguishable until the damage is already done. This is not a script about blaming women. It is a script about understanding a law of nature that operates whether or not you consent. The moment you overinvest emotionally in someone who has not earned it, you do not become more valuable to them. You become less. And the tragedy is not that this happens. The tragedy is that men are taught to believe the opposite, that more effort, more attention, more sacrifice, more availability will build desire. It will not. It will build familiarity. It will build comfort. It will create an environment where she begins to see you not as a man with his own gravity, but as a resource she can access whenever she requires it. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why this keeps happening to you and what it quietly destroys if you ignore it. Carl Jung was born in 1875 into a Europe that still believed in order, structure, and the sovereignty of the individual will. But he spent his career dismantling that belief, showing that beneath the surface of every rational decision was a swirling chaos of unconscious drives, archetypal patterns, and shadow material that most men never acknowledge, let alone integrate. He watched men destroy themselves not through vice or cruelty, but through a quiet surrender of the self to external validation, through the belief that someone else's approval could confirm their worth. And this is where Jung's work becomes surgical in its relevance to the modern male experience. He understood that when a man places the source of his value outside himself, he does not become more connected. He becomes fractured. The psyche splits. The conscious mind tells him he is being loving, patient, and invested. The unconscious knows he is being erased. And that split, that gap between what he believes and what he feels, is where the collapse begins. Here is the thesis, and it will echo through every word that follows. A man who centers his emotional life around a woman before she has demonstrated sustained respect, reciprocity, and investment in his mission does not become the man she desires. He becomes the man she tolerates, and tolerance, over time, curdles into contempt. This is not cruelty. This is biology. This is psychology. This is the same pattern Jung observed in his patients again and again. The man who abandons his individuation process, who stops the work of becoming himself, who outsources his sense of meaning to a relationship, and then wonders why that relationship begins to feel like a slow suffocation. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. A man meets a woman. There is attraction, momentum, energy. In the beginning, he is still himself. He has routines. He has friends. He has projects that matter to him. He responds to her messages when it suits him, not immediately. He makes plans and keeps them, even if she is uncertain. And she is drawn to this, not because he is distant or cold, but because he has a life that does not revolve around her, and that life creates gravity. But then something shifts. Maybe she pulls back slightly, perhaps she takes longer to reply, perhaps she mentions another man in passing, and something inside him tightens, and without realizing it, he begins to compensate. He texts more, he offers more reassurance, he rearranges his schedule to accommodate hers, he begins to explain himself, to prove his intentions, to demonstrate his investment, and he tells himself this is maturity, this is emotional availability, this is what modern relationships require. But what is really happening is this: he is teaching her that his attention is cheap, that his time is negotiable, that his mission is secondary, and she does not consciously think about any of this. She begins to feel it. The attraction that was there in the beginning starts to fade. Not because he did anything wrong, but because he stopped doing what made him attractive in the first place. He stopped being a man with his own center of gravity. Jung would say this man has merged with his anima, the unconscious feminine aspect of his psyche. He has become possessed by the image of the relationship, by the fantasy of what it could be, and in doing so, he has lost contact with his own self. And once that happens, no amount of effort will restore what has been lost, because the effort itself is the problem. She does not need more of his attention. She needs him to reclaim his attention and direct it back towards something that matters, something that is not her. I once worked with a man who described this exact pattern. He had been dating a woman for 6 months. In the beginning, she pursued him. She texted first. She made herself available. But over time, he noticed the dynamic shifting. She became less responsive, more critical, more dismissive of his time. And his response was to double down, to be more present, more available, more accommodating. He stopped going to the gym. He cancelled plans with friends. He spent his evenings waiting for her to confirm whether or not she would see him. And when I asked him why, he said, "Because I want her to know I care." But caring in the absence of boundaries is not love, it is desperation. And desperation does not inspire desire, it inspires withdrawal. The man she later pursued after she ended things with him was not fundamentally different in appearance or status, but he had one quality my client had lost. He was unavailable, not in a manipulative sense, but in the sense that his life was complete. He had things to do, people who depended on him, a mission that did not pause for her uncertainty. And that unavailability created the space for her to feel desire again, because desire requires tension, and tension requires distance. This is what Jung meant when he said that the self must be sovereign. The moment you hand over that sovereignty, the moment you allow another person to become the arbiter of your worth, you lose the one thing that made you worth pursuing in the first place. How does this collapse actually happen? How does a man go from self-possessed to self-abandoned without even realizing he's crossed the threshold? It begins with a misunderstanding. He believes that emotional investment is a currency that accrues value over time. The more he gives, the more he will receive. That love operates on the logic of compound interest, but it does not. Attraction operates on scarcity and self-regard, and the man who gives freely, without reciprocity, without boundaries, without a life that continues regardless of her presence, is not seen as generous. He is seen as common. Phase 1 is numbness and denial. He notices small things. Her replies are shorter, less enthusiastic. She cancels plans more often. She seems distracted when they're together, but he explains it away. She's busy, she's stressed, she's going through something, and maybe she is. But what he refuses to see is that her behavior is also a form of communication. It is her unconscious telling him that something in the dynamic has shifted, and not in his favor. Phase 2 is justification and self-negotiation. He begins to modify his behavior to accommodate her withdrawal. He texts less, thinking that will create space. Then he texts more, thinking she needs reassurance. He offers to help with things she hasn't asked for help with. He suggests activities, trips, and plans, all designed to reignite what he feels slipping away. And in his mind, he is being proactive. He is being loving. But what he is really doing is chasing. And chasing, in the economy of attraction, is the fastest way to devalue yourself. Phase 3 is self-abandonment and the loss of respect. This is where the damage becomes structural. He stops going to the gym because he's tired and he's exhausted, because he's spending his nights in low-grade anxiety, checking his phone, replaying conversations, trying to decode her mixed signals. He stops seeing his friends because he doesn't want to miss a text. He stops working on his projects because he can no longer focus. His entire emotional system has been rerouted to orbit around her, and she feels it. Not as pressure necessarily, but as weight, as neediness, as the presence of a man who has lost his frame. And here is the cruelest part. She does not consciously decide to lose respect for him. It happens automatically, because respect, especially feminine respect for masculine presence, is not a choice. It is a response, and it responds to one thing above all else: self-possession. The man who has it does not need to demand respect. It emanates from him. The man who has lost it cannot negotiate his way back to it, no matter how hard he tries. I once spoke to a man who described this exact progression. He had been in a relationship for 2 years. At first, she admired him. She told her friends about him. She initiated intimacy. But over time, he noticed her becoming colder, more critical, more distant. And his response was to try harder, to be more understanding, to give her more space, then more attention, then more explanation. He rewrote himself in real time, trying to become the man she needed him to be. And the more he changed, the less she respected him. When I asked him what he thought had gone wrong, he said, "I don't know. I did everything she asked." And that was the problem. He had done everything she asked. He had made her the author of his life. And no woman, no matter how much she claims to want a man who listens, who adapts, who sacrifices, can respect a man who hands her that level of control. Because control without boundaries is not leadership, it is surrender. And surrender does not inspire desire. It inspires contempt. The man she later left him for was not wealthier, not better looking, not more successful. But he had one quality my client had lost. He had a life that continued, with or without her. He had friends he saw regularly. He had hobbies he refused to compromise on. He had a mission that preceded her and would outlast her. And that continuity, that sense that he was not performing for her approval, created the space for her to feel attraction again. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the integration of the shadow. The shadow is not the evil part of you. It is the part you have disowned to be acceptable. It is the part that says no, the part that walks away, the part that refuses to negotiate disrespectfully. And when a man loses contact with his shadow, when he becomes only light, only accommodation, only agreeableness, he does not become more lovable. He becomes invisible. Now zoom out. Because what is happening to the individual man is not happening in isolation. It is part of a larger system, a larger cultural script that has quietly rewritten the rules of engagement between men and women without offering men a new map. We live in an environment where masculine initiative is simultaneously demanded and punished. A man is expected to approach, to lead, to pursue, to risk rejection. But if he does so incorrectly, even once, he can be publicly shamed, professionally destroyed, or legally vulnerable. The margin for error has collapsed. And so many men have done the math and decided the risk is no longer worth the reward. They have not withdrawn from women because they hate them. They have withdrawn because the cost of engagement has become unpredictable and asymmetric. Dating apps have commodified attention. Social media has inflated the perception of options. A woman with an average appearance and an active profile can receive more attention in a week than her grandmother received in a lifetime. And this is not her fault. But it does change the game. It creates an environment where even a moderate investment from a man feels insufficient because she is constantly reminded that other men are waiting, other options are available, and other possibilities are just a swipe away. And into this environment walks the man who still believes that sincerity, effort, and emotional availability will be rewarded. And he is confused when they are not. He is bewildered when she ghosts him after 3 dates. He is confused when she tells him she needs space, then posts photos with another man 2 weeks later. He is confused because he is operating on an old map in a new territory, and no one told him the rules had changed. Jung would say this is the unconscious compensation of a civilization that has lost its center. When the masculine principle is suppressed in the culture, when men are taught that their natural assertiveness is toxic, their sexuality is dangerous, their ambition is problematic, the unconscious does not simply accept this. it compensates. And that compensation shows up as chaos in relationships, in dating dynamics, in the quiet withdrawal of millions of men from the very systems that once gave their lives meaning. Spengler called this civilizational winter, the late stage of a culture where the values that built it are inverted, where strength is pathologized and weakness is celebrated, where men are expected to apologize for existing. And in that environment, the man who still tries to play by the old rules, who still believes that being a good man, a kind man, a present man will be enough, finds himself not celebrated, but exploited. If a system demands your vulnerability but offers no protection, walking away is not cowardice. It is wisdom. And this is the cost of staying blind. You lose your mission. You lose your self-respect. You enter relationships that feel hollow because they are built on your willingness to shrink rather than her willingness to rise. You begin to move through the world like a ghost, performing the motions of your own life without inhabiting it. And eventually, you become a stranger to yourself. She does not kill your purpose, she reflects its absence. So what does sovereignty look like in action? How does a man who understands this reclaim his center and move through the world differently? First, notice when you are rearranging your life to accommodate uncertainty. If she is unsure whether she can see you, do not hold your Saturday hostage. Make other plans, not to punish her, not to manipulate her, but because your time has value independent of her decision. And if she reaches out later and you are unavailable, that is not a loss, that is information. It tells her that access to you requires decisiveness, and decisiveness is the foundation of respect. Second, stop pretending that over-communication is connection. Most men, when they feel a woman pulling away, respond by increasing their output: more texts, more explanations, more reassurance. But this does not close the distance, it highlights it. The man who is secure in himself does not need to fill every silence. He allows space to exist because space is where desire lives. If she does not reach out, that is also information, and information is more valuable than comfort. Third, refuse to abandon your mission for the promise of her approval. If you had plans to train, work, see friends, or build something that matters, do not cancel those plans because she became available, not out of spite, but because those plans are the infrastructure of your life, and infrastructure does not bend for convenience. The man who keeps his word to himself is the man others learn to take seriously. Fourth, allow her to react while you remain unmoved. If she tests you, and she will, consciously or not, do not scramble to explain yourself. Do not negotiate with her emotions as if they are facts. Sit with the discomfort. Let her feel whatever she feels. Your job is not to manage her emotional weather. Your job is to remain anchored in your own frame, and if she cannot respect that frame, she is telling you everything you need to know. Fifth, begin to move as if the outcome does not define you. This is the most complex and most important shift. The man who needs a particular woman to validate him has already lost. The man who can walk away from any situation that does not serve him has reclaimed his power. And paradoxically, that willingness to walk away is often what makes her choose to stay. Not because she fears losing you, but because she finally senses that you are not hers to lose. You belong to yourself. Every one of these patterns is a return to what Jung called the integrated self, the man who is not split between what he wants and what he does, between who he is and who he pretends to be. The integrated man does not perform. He is. And that authenticity, that coherence, is the single most attractive quality a man can possess. So here are the two paths in front of you. If you ignore this, if you continue to believe that more effort, more sacrifice, more emotional availability will eventually be rewarded, you will wake up 5 years from now, smaller than you are today. You will be in relationships that feel like negotiations. You will be surrounded by people who take more than they give. You will have abandoned the hobbies, the friendships, the projects that once gave you meaning, and you will tell yourself it was worth it. But late at night, when you are alone with your thoughts, you will know the truth. You traded your sovereignty for the illusion of connection, and the price was everything that made you worth knowing. If you answer this, if you take what has been said here and allow it to reorder how you move through the world, you will also wake up 5 years from now, different, but the difference will be internal. You will have fewer people in your life, but the ones who remain will respect you. You will have walked away from situations that others would have clung to, and you will not regret a single one. You will have built something that belongs to you, a mission, a body of work, a life that does not require external validation to feel real. And the women who enter that life will enter it differently because they will sense that you are not negotiating, you are offering. And if the offer is not met with respect, you will withdraw it without bitterness, because you understand that not every woman is ready for a man who knows his worth. The first path is easier in the short term. It requires no confrontation, no discomfort, no loss, but it is a slow death. The second path is more challenging. It is lonelier at first. It requires you to sit with uncertainty, to walk away from what feels good in the moment for what serves you in the long term. But it is the only path that preserves your dignity, and dignity, once lost, is almost impossible to reclaim. Here is the thesis one more time, stripped of everything except its core. The moment you center your emotional life around someone who has not earned that position, you do not become more valuable to them, you become a resource. And resources are not desired, they are consumed. She does not destroy your purpose. She reveals whether you ever had one. If this hit something in you, if you felt the weight of recognition as you read it, then do not let it fade. Share this with the men in your life who need to hear it. Subscribe to keep this work alive for those who will come after you, and take what has been said here, not as theory, but as instruction. One final line, and then you are free to choose. The man who can walk away is the only man worth following.